Hey guys, tonight we're diving into something you probably never thought much about: knighthood off the battlefield. Forget the shining armour and sword fights. The real life of a knight, well, let's just say it's a mix of muddy boots, long stretches of waiting, and questionable hygiene practices. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, let me know where you're tuning in from and what time it is where you are. It's always fun to see where you're all listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. So, you've probably seen the movies, right? The ones where knights are gallantly riding into battle, shining in their armour and being showered in glory, you know, the sort of knight that rides into battle with an ever-present, perfect hairdo, effortlessly slaying dragons, rescuing damsels, and maybe even winning some wars in between lunch breaks. But let's be real, if you had the unfortunate privilege of living in medieval times, you'd be way more familiar with a different side of knightly life. The part that involves far more awkwardly waiting for orders, grumbling in camp, and, well, being absolutely disgusting by modern standards. And the food, oh boy. Let's just say your average night was less about feasting on roasted boar and more about chewing through hard bread and soggy vegetables. Knights were supposed to be these noble, valiant warriors. Right, but when you strip away the romanticised version, you start to see a much less glamorous picture. Sure, they might have been out there fighting for their lord, or some lofty ideal about chivalry, but most of the time, they were stuck on the outskirts of a battlefield, covered in mud, trying to remember where they left their helmet, and listening to their stomach growl as they sat in uncomfortable positions around a fire, eating whatever they could scrape together. All this, of course, after hours of bickering about who had the worst of it. So let's set the scene. Picture yourself as one of these knights. You're not in battle today, which, let's be honest, is both a relief and a little boring. No glorious sword fights. Instead, you're stuck in a camp somewhere far from home. It's cold, wet, and the smell of unwashed bodies and animal dung hangs thick in the air. You've got a pile of gear that seems to get heavier every time you try to move it, and the last time you had a decent meal was a distant memory. But hey, at least you're not dead. That's a win. Right, you wake up in the morning, stiff from sleeping in your armour, which, surprise, doesn't exactly make for a great night's sleep. This wasn't some fluffy bed of hay and fine linen. Nope, the ground is hard, and your blanket feels like it was made of sandpaper. The smell of wet leather and stale bread is the only thing that welcomes you to another day. Oh, and don't forget the horses, they're stinking up the camp too. The only thing more miserable than the night is the poor horse that's just as tired and hungry as you are. The oxen. They're rolling their eyes at you, half expecting you to do all the work while they stand there, chewing lazily and waiting for the next break. You might be expecting some sort of royal treatment, but no. The truth is, you're lucky if you're allowed a moment of rest. You've got gear to maintain, armour to polish, or more like, try to polish because it's pretty dented. And, of course, your sword. Don't forget the sword. Every knight needs one. And it has to be at the ready at all times, even if you're sitting by the fire, trying to figure out how to make the most of your stale bread and cheese. Speaking of cheese, don't get too attached to anything edible, because it might be gone by the end of the day. The food situation is always up for debate, especially when you're stuck with your fellow knights. Each of you convinced that you deserve the biggest portion of whatever meagre rations you've managed to grab. Yes, bickering over food, especially the last piece of cheese, is as much a part of knightly life as wielding a sword. Speaking of which, if you're feeling particularly proud about your armour and your ability to look good in a fight, it's time to stop daydreaming. The truth, you can barely walk in that armour without tripping over your own feet, and when you try to sit down, don't even get me started. It's like you're trying to fold yourself into a human-sized pretzel while balancing on a wooden chair that doesn't quite seem like it was built for sitting, but more for making your life as uncomfortable as possible. And when you have to run somewhere in full gear, good luck. You'll be lucky if you don't trip and fall flat on your face. At least, if there's any upside to this, it's that you get some downtime to sharpen your sword and practice your combat skills. But that's not as easy as it sounds either. You might want to try sparring with your fellow knights. But here's the issue. No one's actually good at it when they're all tired and annoyed from being stuck in a cold, muddy camp for what feels like forever. And let's not even talk about the time you try to polish your armour only for it to get all muddy again after 5 minutes of walking through camp. Yes, this is the knight's life off the battlefield. Now let's talk about one thing you've probably heard of sleeping, you'd think. As a knight, you'd get some decent rest. Right, nope. Let's be honest, sleep for a knight is a luxury that just doesn't happen. Your bed hard ground with a thin, itchy blanket that smells like horse sweat. The only thing harder than your bed is your body after sleeping on it. You try to settle into a position that doesn't leave you with neck pain the next morning, but it's futile. There's no avoiding the fact that your body is at odds with the world around you. That's your reality. But let's be real here. This isn't exactly a lifestyle to look up to. Knights didn't have time to be romanticised. Their lives were harsh, demanding, and involved a lot of uncomfortable moments. And it's not just about battling on the field, it's about surviving day after day, in a world where survival is a continuous struggle. It's not the kind of life that gets immortalised in glorious sagas and epic poems. Nope. Knights were more about enduring the grind, managing their personal battles with exhaustion, boredom, and the never-ending fight for a little bit of dignity amidst it all. At the end of the day, though, what keeps knights going? Well, it's that burning desire to win, whether it's for glory, honour, or just plain survival. They know what's waiting for them if they don't push through. The road to knighthood wasn't just paved with swords and armour, it was filled with the gritty determination to make it another day. No matter how much you bickered over the bread, how uncomfortable the armour was, or how annoying the horses could be. And just when you think you can't take it anymore, someone cheers you on, whether it's your fellow knight or the promise of what's coming next. The journey, after all, is long. The work isn't easy, but it's part of the knightly tradition, because whether you're in battle or out of it, there's always something to prove. You wake up, groggy, still partially crumpled in your armour, and try to get your bearings. The morning sun is already creeping over the horizon, but you're not quite ready to face the world yet. Let's face it, the last thing you're looking forward to is the reality of what you're about to do. You've got armour to clean, weapons to check, and, of course, the smell. Oh, the smell. And that's not even the worst part of it all. In medieval times, knights weren't exactly known for their showering habits. Actually, they didn't shower at all. It's not like they had luxurious bathtubs or showers at their disposal, or even access to clean water most of the time. Personal hygiene was, well, let's say, not a priority. To make matters worse, when knights did get around to washing themselves, the process was, to put it bluntly, barbaric. They would occasionally have a bath by dunking themselves in a river or filling up a basin with water. But even that was a rare luxury. And let's not forget, in the midst of all the smelly chaos of battle preparation, what really matters most is your armour, which, when you think about it, is as heavy and sweaty as your body's layers are. The whole thing becomes an endless cycle of sweating, wearing armour, taking it off, sweating some more, and maybe a quick wipe down with a damp cloth. But there's no real way around the fact that, by the end of the day, you're going to smell like a mixture of horse, dirt, and, well, let's just say it's not pretty. Imagine being surrounded by a dozen of your fellow knights, all equally smelly and equally not enjoying the fact that their armour has become an extension of their own sweaty, unwashed skin. Historians still argue whether knights in the Middle Ages were actually as grimy as the legends suggest. Some believe that. Despite the lack of hygiene, knights must have been slightly cleaner due to the occasional indulgence in washing ceremonies. But let's face it, the fact that most of their time was spent covered in armour meant they probably couldn't be bothered to get clean unless it was absolutely necessary. Like when they were on the verge of collapse or losing consciousness from exhaustion. So, at the end of the day, knights weren't exactly winning any cleanliness awards, and the less said about their hygiene the better. Now, while the situation doesn't seem too favourable, there are a few tricks knights had up their sleeves to somewhat combat the foul stench. Enter the scented bag. These little bundles of herbs and oils were worn around the knight's neck, or tucked into their armour to mask the body odour. While it didn't exactly solve the problem, it did help a little bit. Imagine being a knight, trudging through the mud, trying to keep your sword sharp and your mind focused, all while the pungent odour of sweat and dirt clings to you like a second skin. You'd probably be eager to clutch that little bag of lavender and try to convince yourself that you were, in fact, mildly pleasant to be around. But wait, it gets better or worse. Depending on how you look at it, let's not forget the fact that the knights didn't even get to change their clothes regularly. I'm sure they would have loved a fresh set of linens every now and then, but in reality, they were stuck wearing the same layers day after day. Can you imagine wearing the same sweaty, mud-covered tunic for days on end? Even if you did have a spare set, it probably wasn't much better than the first. And the scent, hell. Let's just say that if someone walked by and you didn't smell like a nightly mixture of armour and defeat, you'd probably smell like you've been living in a barn with a pack of horses. Not exactly the medieval version of dashing. And when it comes to your boots, well, get ready for a reality check. A knight's boots weren't the carefully crafted pieces of art we might imagine today. Instead, they were heavy, clunky, and built more for practicality than comfort. The boots themselves, a breeding ground for stinky, sweaty feet. In fact, knights were often forced to take off their boots and air them out. But that didn't mean they could just change socks whenever they felt like it. For many knights, socks weren't even a thing. And whatever foot protection they had was quickly soaked in the sweat that accumulated after hours of trudging through the dirt. And if the journey was particularly muddy, well, the socks would get drenched in muck, adding a whole new layer of discomfort to their day. Speaking of feet, let's take a moment to discuss how those heavy boots had a habit of getting stuck in the muck. Not only did knights have to battle their own fatigue and the weight of their armour, but they also had to contend with treacherous, sticky mud. The whole process became one big cycle of moving forward, getting stuck, struggling to pull your boots out of the sticky sludge, only to get stuck again. It's like a never-ending battle that you didn't sign up for, but couldn't avoid. But hey, at least you're not alone. The horses you're travelling with are going through the same thing. Imagine being the knight, sitting atop your poor steed, trying to keep things together while the mud splashes up on your face and the saddle squeaks beneath you. The poor horses, they're probably thinking the same thing. Is this really worth it? But again, they're stuck with you, and you're stuck with them. You both plod along in a symbiotic relationship of mud, sweat, and shared misery. You know, it's almost hard to believe that knights were expected to be these perfect specimens of chivalry and bravery when in reality, they were just as muddled, smelly, and human as the rest of us. Their armour may have been shiny for the first 5 minutes, but after hours on the trail or days in the saddle, it was less about looks and more about survival. And that's where the true knightly spirit came into play, not in the idea of glory, but in the ability to just keep pushing through all the mess, all the exhaustion, and all the discomfort. But wait, there's still more to the life of a knight than just being stuck in your stinky armour, the food situation. Don't even get me started. You'd think knights would have feasts, fit for royalty. Right, but no, the reality is far from it. Most of their meals consisted of simple bread, salted meat, and if they were lucky, some vegetables. The idea of sitting down to a grand feast of roasted meats and fine wines was something most knights only dreamed of. Instead, they spent their days chewing through hard, stale bread, trying to make the best of what they could cook over a small fire. Here's a fun little tidbit for you knights. Often had to eat meals that could survive on the road. That means long-lasting and, shall we say, less than ideal food choices. Think of things like hard cheese, preserved meats, and bread that had probably seen better days. But that's not all. What they drank, the nightly beverage of choice was a nice, warm mug of watered-down wine. Yes, wine was diluted with water to make it last longer. But when it was hot and fermented for hours, it wasn't exactly a delicacy. Historians still argue whether knights drank more wine than water because they didn't trust the water, and with good reason, or if they just preferred the taste. Either way, the wine, while it wasn't the finest, was certainly a better option than the local stream water, which might be filled with all kinds of, well, not so appetizing things. But the food, that's where things get even trickier. For knights constantly on the move, having food that could be carried and kept for long periods was key. The goal wasn't luxury, it was survival. So, instead of delicacies, you had to make do with whatever you could carry in your saddlebags. And that meant mostly dried meats, nuts, and hard biscuits that, quite frankly, could break your teeth if you weren't careful. No, it wasn't feasting like the legends suggest. It was just about getting by. So, here you are, sweaty, tired, and eating a dried slab of salted meat while you trudge through the mud, listening to your boots squelch with every step. And after all that, the next challenge, getting enough rest so you can do it all over again. But we'll save the sleeping conditions for the next section, where you'll learn just how unfit for sleep medieval knights really were. Alright, you've managed to eat your slightly questionable meal, and now you're left with the greatest challenge of all, trying to sleep. But let's not kid ourselves, you're not going to sleep in a cosy, warm bed like you'd imagine. Nope. This is medieval nightlife, and that means finding comfort in the most unlikely places, or, more likely, in no comfort at all. When you're not out on the battlefield, one of the biggest challenges you face is simply resting your weary body after a long day of trudging through mud and battling exhaustion. You think you might get a nice spot to sleep, maybe even a little peace and quiet, but instead, what you get is a hard, cold patch of earth, with maybe a thin layer of hay, or a blanket if you're lucky. Your comfortable night on the ground is anything but that. It's less about snuggling under the covers, and more about finding a spot that doesn't have a rock in it. If you're really lucky, you'll find a slightly softer spot, but you're never really prepared for the morning aches and pains that are about to come. Knights didn't sleep in palatial tents with luxurious linens. Instead, they made do with what they had: rough, hard ground, and, sometimes, a blanket that offered as much comfort as a slab of wood. And let's not forget the soundscape. Oh, you'll have plenty of background noise as you try to rest. From the sounds of the horses snorting and stomping, to the occasional grumbling of your fellow knights. And if you're near a campfire, get ready for the crackling embers to keep you company while you toss and turn all night. Now, you might think knights had a bit of an edge when it came to sleeping. Right, after all, they're supposed to be warriors, so they're trained to be tough. But that toughness doesn't translate into comfort. Imagine lying there, fully clothed, in your armour, yes, still in your armour, trying to fall asleep, and then having to adjust your helmet every 5 minutes because it's digging into your head, but you can't take it off because you never know when someone will need you to be battle ready. And when the sun sets and it gets colder, well, now you've got the added bonus of shivering in your armour, wishing you could just rip it off. But knowing that's not an option, you learn quickly that sleep in this world isn't a luxury, it's a test of endurance. And as if the uncomfortable sleep conditions weren't enough, you also have to contend with your fellow knights. It's not like you're alone in this miserable journey. There are other knights around you. And let me tell you, they're not exactly the ideal sleeping buddies, from the occasional snoring which, in armour, is somehow even worse to the soft, endless grumbling that rises from the camp. You start to question if sleep is even possible in this life. You might try to drown it out with your own complaints, but that only gets you so far. And if you're lucky enough to sleep through the night, don't get too comfortable, because when morning comes, you'll be waking up stiff as a board, ready to repeat the entire cycle. But wait, remember how I mentioned the lavish nightly accommodations before? Well, just in case you thought your time spent on the ground was the worst of it, let me remind you of the next step in the nightmarish sleep cycle, the night watch. Oh yes, you didn't think you'd just be snoozing the whole time, did you? Gnome knights took turns standing guard at night, keeping watch over the camp while everyone else slept. And the worst part, it's not like you get a warm bed and soft blanket while you do this. Nope. Instead, you're standing out in the cold, keeping your eyes peeled for any potential threats, which could be anything from wild animals to fellow knights who've had a bit too much to drink every so often. You might hear a rustling in the bushes, and your heart races as you jump to attention, only to realise it's just a squirrel. But at that moment, it's the squirrel that might be your greatest enemy, because let's face it, you're exhausted, you're freezing, and that tiny creature could very well be the thing that tips you over the edge of insanity. And if you're thinking, well, maybe at least the knights had a chance to relax at some point during the day. Let me stop you right there. Knights didn't really get breaks, especially when they weren't on the battlefield. You know what break meant for a knight? It meant standing around the camp, maybe stretching your legs a little, but mostly just waiting for orders, waiting for the next fight, waiting for the next piece of information, or just waiting for someone to stop talking about the state of the food supply. And if there was a break, you'd probably spend it complaining with your fellow knights about the hardships you're enduring, wondering aloud why you signed up for this. Spoiler, you didn't actually sign up for this. You were either born into it or pressed into service. And yet, through all of this, the discomfort, the bad food, the awkward sleeping arrangements, and the constant noise, you're expected to maintain a sense of dignity, pride, and strength. This is the ideal knight, remember. But in reality, knights were mostly just men trying to survive. And survive they did, but at a cost. The long marches, the hunger, the exhaustion, all of it took a toll on their bodies and minds. For many, the idea of being a knight wasn't a glamorous dream. It was a hard, painful existence. Knights spent more time trying to simply get through the day than actually living the fantasy life we associate with them. In fact, it wasn't uncommon for knights to suffer from some pretty severe mental and physical fatigue. Yes, they were tough, but they were also human. The constant strain, both physical and emotional, weighed heavily on them. And when you add in the harsh realities of camp life, the mud, the cold, the exhaustion, it's no wonder that many knights had a somewhat dim view of their job. When the reality of it all set in, they might have signed up for honour, glory, and glory alone. But what they got was endless days of trudging through miserable weather, sleeping on hard ground, and eating food that felt more like punishment than sustenance. Historians still argue whether knights ever truly embraced this way of life, or if they were simply forced into it by circumstance. It's easy to imagine knights as these valiant heroes, but the truth is, many of them were just regular men with hopes, dreams, and the need for rest. And rest was something that was often in short supply. They might have been warriors in name, but in practice, they were men who dealt with the same struggles of survival as anyone else. They just happened to be carrying swords while they did it. And once the day is over, and you finally crawl into your makeshift bed, the reality of your existence hits harder than ever. You know that the next day will bring more of the same hard work, uncomfortable conditions, and long stretches of trudging through the mud. But that's the life of a night endurance. It's not glamorous, it's not always heroic, but it's a life that demands more than you think. And as you lay there, surrounded by your fellow knights, you can't help but laugh at the absurdity of it all. You've survived another day, despite everything. But as sleep finally begins to claim you, you're reminded tomorrow's going to be just like today, and that's okay, because you're a knight, and you're built for this. Or at least, you've convinced yourself you are. You wake up again, this time to the glorious sound of your fellow knights groaning as they rise, and the ever-lovely feeling of your joints reminding you that, yes, you're definitely not getting any younger. The morning chill bites at your skin, and as the sun peeks over the horizon, you can already feel the weight of the day pressing down on you. The next task on the nightly to-do list, gear check. Every morning, you're expected to inspect your armour and make sure that everything is in tip-top shape, because you never know when you'll be called into action. Not that you're expecting an immediate battle, it's just a matter of principle, right? The knights must always be ready, even if the battle doesn't come until tomorrow, or the day after that, or the one after that. You reach for your sword, which, despite being your prized possession, is far from glamorous at this point. If it had once gleamed with the promise of victory, now it's more of a dull, slightly battered reminder of the many skirmishes that never happened. The leather of the scabbard is cracked from the hours of dragging it through mud, sweat, and rain. It's seen better days. You slide it out, holding it up to the light, only to realise the poor thing probably needs a cleaning. But cleaning it would mean finding some oil. And good luck with that when your provisions are down to a few scraps of meat and some hardtack. So, instead, you give the sword a quick glance, a quick swipe of your sleeve because, well, why not, and slide it back into place. Historians still argue about how often knights actually used their swords. Some think they were glorified tools for status, showing off their position and rank rather than being used in actual combat. After all, the sword was one of the most recognised symbols of chivalry, so knights had to carry them even if they weren't wielding them in battle. Still, the sword, dull or shiny, was never far from a knight's side. It was as much a part of their identity as their armour and their horse. Speaking of which, the horses. Let's talk about your noble steed for a moment, shall we? You were promised a beautiful, powerful animal to ride into battle sleek, well-groomed and full of spirit. But here's the reality. Your horse, while noble, is as tired as you are, and much like you. It's been living the life of a knight. You try to make sure it's well-fed, well-rested, and not too stressed out. But that's hard when the entire camp is living in the same conditions: mud, sweat, and constant discomfort. Your steed doesn't get much rest either, and it certainly doesn't get pampered. So, while you might think of your horse as your battle companion, the reality is that the two of you are just getting through the grind of the day together. But this is where the humour of knightly life truly shines. You might think you're taking care of your steed, but let's be real. There are times when your horse looks at you with the same level of resignation as you feel about life itself. It's as though the poor creature knows this is our life. We're stuck with it. But don't feel too bad. The horse doesn't mind. After all, it's your only companion on this gruelling journey. You're both in the same miserable boat, or, should I say, saddle. You're not friends, but you're both definitely survivors. Now, let's not forget the reality of riding a horse. Your saddle might seem comfortable at first glance, but after hours of riding, it turns into a medieval torture device. Imagine sitting on a piece of wood for hours, with no padding, no comfort. And you're not just sitting there idly, no, you're bouncing, you're jolting, you're holding on for dear life, as your horse tries to navigate the uneven terrain. It's like riding a bucking bronco, except there's no clown in the rodeo cheering you on. Instead, you're just another knight with sore legs and a bruised backside. Meanwhile, your fellow knights are having their own struggles. They may have the same horse, the same armour, and the same exhaustion, but that doesn't mean they're dealing with things as well as you are. If anything, the misery loves company. You can hear their complaints loud and clear across the camp as they struggle with their own armour, their own sore muscles, and their own issues with their horses. There's a particular knight who's already had it with the whole thing. He's swearing at his steed, slapping its side, and threatening to throw his sword at it. Not that it'll do any good, of course, unless he wants to deal with a very confused, very unimpressed horse. You have to laugh, mostly because you're too tired to cry. You laugh at how everyone seems to have reached the same conclusion. This is hard, but you keep moving forward, because that's what you're supposed to do, right? This is the life of a night's ride. Eat, complain, rinse and repeat. Now, what about the fighting part of knightly life? Surely that's where the real glory comes in. Right, you've seen the tapestries, heard the songs, and admired the paintings, all showing knights charging into battle with swords raised high and banners flying. But here's the thing. Most knights spent far more time dealing with the aftermath of a battle than actually fighting. When a battle was over, the real work began. Knights had to take care of their armour, care for their horses, and, let's be honest, spend far too much time pretending they weren't injured after a battle, because while everyone thinks knights are invincible warriors, in reality, they were constantly dealing with cuts, bruises, and exhaustion. But it wasn't just the physical toll that got to you. No, there was also the mental strain of trying to live up to this idealised version of what it meant to be a knight. You were supposed to be honourable, brave, and noble. But the reality of the job was that you often found yourself questioning that very ideal. Was it worth it? Was it all for glory? Or was it just a system of gruelling labour, constantly wearing you down in pursuit of some abstract goal of knighthood? That's why, every now and then, you'll find yourself in a corner of the camp, sitting with a few fellow knights, and grumbling about the state of your lives. You can't help but laugh bitterly when one of them mutters about how the only thing knightly about this life is the armour and the horse. And that's the moment you realise they're absolutely right. The fantasy of knighthood is just that, a fantasy. The reality is sweaty, exhausting, and uncomfortable. The worst part of it all. You have to keep going, because if you don't, if you stop even for a moment, you're at risk of falling behind. And if you fall behind, well, let's just say it doesn't usually end well for knights who lose their place in the order. But that doesn't stop the inner rebellion from bubbling up every now and then. You wonder what it would be like to just walk away, to take off your armour, ride off into the sunset, and leave the whole thing behind. But then you realise you've come too far. There's no going back. And so, you soldier on. The days blend together. The hardships remain constant. And you and your comrades carry on, each of you silently questioning what on earth you're doing here. But too proud to admit it. The armour chafes, your muscles ache, your horse is ready to bolt at any given moment, and yet, somehow, you make it through another day. You've learned how to survive, not just on the battlefield, but in this strange, miserable world of knighthood. The truth is, you're not really a knight until you've embraced the absurdity of it all, until you've learned to laugh at the misery, grin through the exhaustion, and keep on going and going and going. And as you close your eyes again that night after another long, grueling day, you realise that maybe, just maybe, this is the true essence of knighthood. Not glory, not fame, but the simple act of surviving the grind and carrying on. Because if you don't keep going, you'll get stuck in the mud, left behind by your fellow knights. And that's a fate far worse than any battle. Here's the thing, no one tells you about being a knight. You never really get a break. It's like this endless loop where you ride, you march, you fight, and then surprise, you do it all over again. Every single day, at some point. You might have imagined you'd be sitting at a grand banquet, eating roasted meats, laughing with your fellow knights, and maybe receiving some kind of accolade for your valour. Instead, most of your time is spent trying to scrape together some food, dragging your body through mud, and wondering if your armour is slowly eating away at your very soul. Take this morning, for instance. You woke up begrudgingly with sore joints, and your first thought was probably something like, why do I do this? Your second thought, do I really have to wear this armour today? Of course you do, because that's what knights do. They wear armour. They never take it off unless absolutely necessary, which is usually to wash it off or for a quick nap in a very uncomfortable position. And when you do take it off, you realise just how much your body is rebelling against you. You're stiff, your muscles are sore, and every movement feels like a battle in itself. But you don't have the luxury of complaining. You're a knight, which means the world expects you to suck it up and get moving. The problem is that getting moving isn't as simple as just putting one foot in front of the other. No, being a knight means you're expected to carry your sword, shield, and all sorts of heavy gear with you wherever you go. You might think, oh, that's just part of the job. But when you're dragging yourself up the same hill for the 100th time, you start to wonder how much longer you can keep up the charade. You can't show weakness. You can't take a moment to rest unless you've absolutely hit rock bottom. And you definitely can't ask for help, because knights don't ask for help. That's what the peasants are for. Right? But don't worry, you're not alone in this misery. You've got your comrades, each of whom is more or less as miserable as you are. The guys you're travelling with aren't exactly picture-perfect knights either. They're grumpy, exhausted, and probably as fed up with their armour as you are. There's one particular knight in your group who's got this look of constant disappointment. He's the kind of guy who thinks the whole knight thing is a bit overrated. He didn't sign up for any of this being the endless trudging, the bad food, and of course, the endless hours of just being awake while your body begs for mercy. And the worst part is that, when you think about it, you kind of agree with him, a little. But you keep marching. Why? Because the alternative is staying behind. And that's a fate worse than death. You're out here, and you're in this mess for the long haul. You might hate it now, but if you back out, you're not just giving up on the whole idea of knighthood, you're giving up on your reputation. You're giving up on everything you've worked for. It's like this unwritten rule of nightlife. You never admit defeat, even if you're about to collapse from exhaustion. You keep your shoulders straight, your chin high, and pretend that every step you take is a grand, noble stride. Now, you might be wondering, okay, fine, I'm walking, but what's next? Well, next is a lovely little task known as cleaning your armour. Fun, right. It's not like you can just let it get all grimy and rusty. Knights may have been filthy half the time, but you're not supposed to look filthy. So, you get to scrub your chainmail, shine your helmet, and make sure that every little dent and scratch doesn't make you look too much like you've been rolling around in the dirt for days. Because that's the real secret to knightly life, looking the part, even when you're barely holding it together. You might spend hours trying to clean the darn thing, only to have the dirt somehow sneak right back in. Like some kind of medieval prank. You polish, you scrub, and just as you're about to admire your handiwork, a bit of mud splashes up on your shin. Perfect. Another hour of your life you'll never get back. And to make matters worse, you can't even appreciate the fruits of your labour, because the next time you step outside, someone's going to throw a bucket of water on you, or worse, horse urine. Seriously, it's like the universe is conspiring against you. Now, let's talk about food, or rather, the lack thereof. You've probably heard that knights enjoyed lavish feasts, and sure, on occasion, they did, but most of the time, Meals were less about indulgence and more about survival. You've got the same tired routine of tasteless bread, dubious cuts of meat, and a whole lot of nothing fresh. You remember back to the days when you thought a hearty stew was the height of luxury, but now a stew is just a sad excuse for liquid slop with bits of stringy meat and a few vegetables you can't quite identify, but you eat it anyway. Because you have to. That's the reality of nightly life. There's no room for picky eaters when your only choices are eat or starve. And let's not forget the fighting food fights. Oh yes, there's a wonderful tradition among knights to engage in the great debate of who can make the worst meal. You're sitting around the campfire, trying to figure out how to choke down whatever mystery meat is currently in your bowl. And one knight across from you makes some sarcastic remark about your cooking. And just like that, a little food fight begins. It's not really about the food anymore. It's about proving that you can handle this life. And you can survive the absurdity of it all. So you throw a chunk of stale bread at your buddy. He tosses some rotten meat at you. And for a few glorious moments, you all forget how miserable you are. And sure, you might end up with food in your hair, but who cares, at least you laughed. Of course, even this small reprieve from the grind doesn't last forever. Eventually, the bickering dies down, and it's back to the reality of your nightly life. Your armour is still heavy, your meals are still terrible, and your comrades, well, they're still there, complaining right alongside you. But in that moment of camaraderie, something clicks, you're in this together. Maybe you don't like each other all the time. Maybe you're all just trying to get through the day. But in the end, that's what it means to be a knight. You stick together through the misery, the hardships, and the absurdity of it all. And somehow, that makes it all worth it. You've made it through another day exhausted, frustrated, hungry, and probably a little covered in mud. But tomorrow, well, tomorrow you'll do it all over again. Because that's what knights do. And honestly, you might not know why you're doing it, but you can't imagine doing anything else. The day begins once more, but this time it feels different. You wake up groggy as ever, but something's changed. Maybe it's the way your armour feels this morning heavier, or perhaps it's the fact that you've spent the last few hours lying on the hard ground, listening to the occasional groan of your fellow knights, and you've had just about enough of it today. However, it's not the armour or the lack of a decent bed that's the issue. It's the knowledge that the day is going to be another one where the only things on the agenda are trudging through the mud and managing to stay somewhat functional through the relentless grind. Your thoughts are interrupted by the sound of clanking from across the camp. Someone's already up, rummaging through their provisions, probably looking for something edible that hasn't been totally ruined. The reality of nightly food, let's call it sustenance, if we're being generous, is always a bit of a gamble. You pull yourself up, your body protesting every movement, and glance over at your pack of food. You've got a few more hardtacks, thankfully. They don't spoil. And the remnants of that salted pork from yesterday. Sure, you could trade a couple of your provisions for a chunk of something better, but who are you kidding? You're a knight, not a merchant. That means it's all about practicality, and right now, practicality means choking down whatever's left before you head out. It's only a few miles. You can do this before you take a bite, though. You make the mistake of looking over at your fellow knights. There's Gerald, looking more miserable than usual. He's holding up his chunk of meat like it's the last scrap of food in the entire world, but you can see the wheels turning in his head. He's thinking the same thing you are. Why am I doing this? The thought passes quickly, replaced by the reality of their situation. You all eat in silence, except for the occasional grumble about how terrible the food is. But you make do, because what else is there to do? You're all in the same miserable boat, right? You've been walking for miles now, and as the sun begins to burn the back of your neck, you start to realise just how ridiculous this all is. The knights you included are trudging through the mud. pretending that it's normal, pretending that the pain in your legs doesn't actually feel like fire. You've heard the stories of knights galloping through fields, charging with swords raised high. But here's the reality: most of your time is spent walking slowly through muck and mire. You can't even remember the last time you galloped anywhere. At this point, you're moving at a pace that can only be described as meditative, but really, it's more like soul-crushing. You've long since abandoned the idea of speed or even grace. It's easy to forget the grand ideals you were taught. You were supposed to be gallant and glorious, but right now, all you feel is the weight of your armour, the ache in your body, and the distinct possibility that you're about to collapse from exhaustion. So much for being a knight. But then, suddenly, a voice rings out, "Hurry up, you lot." You glance up to find Sir Reginald. He's one of the older knights, the kind of guy who's seen it all, and never fails to make you feel like you're doing something wrong, hollering at you from the front. It's always Sir Reginald. He never tires, he never complains, and he's constantly reminding everyone else that they should be doing better, which would be annoying if it weren't for the fact that he's probably right. So, you grunt, force your aching limbs to start moving a little faster, and do your best to avoid looking like you've just been dragged through a field of nettles. Now you're walking in line, trying to keep pace with the others. There's a rhythm to it. Everyone's shuffling, one foot in front of the other, heads down, shoulders hunched. No one's talking. It's not because you don't want to, but because, honestly, you don't know what to say. What's there to say when you're all in the same pit of despair? Every now and then, one of the younger knights will mutter something, but the words always come out flat, like a prayer offered in resignation rather than hope. You've all been walking for so long now that you've forgotten what the world outside this endless march even looks like. A few miles later, you find yourself stopping just to breathe, just to exist for a second. But of course, that moment doesn't last long. Someone's already yelling about how you're behind, about how everyone needs to hurry up, or else you'll be stuck walking in circles for the next few hours. So, once again, it's back to the grind. You don't even know why you keep pushing yourself anymore. Is it for honour, glory? A reward you'll never actually receive at this point. You're not even sure. You just keep moving because that's what knights do. They march, they fight, and when the fighting's done, they march again. But for what? This is where the humour kicks in, or at least, where it tries to. You look up at your comrades again, all of whom are grumbling and trudging with the same lack of enthusiasm. The knights, as it turns out, aren't all chiselled heroes straight out of a legend. Some of them look like they might be more at home in a tavern than on a battlefield. And you can't help but laugh at how ridiculous this whole thing is. You're supposed to be honourable warriors, but instead, you look like a bunch of very tired, very grumpy villagers. There's Frank, the one with the pock-marked face and perpetually drooping eyes. He's probably the least knightly knight you've ever met. And yet here he is, keeping pace, swearing under his breath as he drags his sword behind him. The only thing keeping him going is the stubborn thought that if he stops, someone will probably start yelling at him again. Frank might not have much pride left, but he's got a lot of spite. And honestly, at this point, that's probably enough to keep going. But as the hours tick by, you feel it, the real weight of your life as a knight. This is it. You don't fight dragons. You don't win glorious battles in shining armour. You wake up, you eat something terrible, you march for miles, and then you go to bed, only to do it all over again. Is this the life you thought you'd have? Probably not, but it's the life you've got. You've committed to this, and now, it's just about surviving. If you survive long enough, maybe you'll get some glory out of it. Or maybe you'll die on some forgotten battlefield, and your story will fade away, lost in the muck of history. The thought lingers in your mind for longer than you'd like, but then, just as you start to feel like you might break, something unbelievable happens. You round the bend, and suddenly, There it is, the feast. It's not much, but it's enough. The smell of freshly cooked meat reaches your nose, and for a brief moment, you feel alive again. The knights gather around, murmuring excitedly as food is handed out, and suddenly, everything feels right for a second. You can hear the others talking, joking, even laughing. It's the first time in a long while that anyone has looked happy, and you, of course, can't help but feel a bit of that happiness, too. It's funny how a simple meal can do that to you, isn't it? One moment, you're trudging through the mud, feeling like you've lost everything, and the next, you're savouring something that resembles a decent meal, and for that brief moment, you remember what it's like to be a knight. You're not just fighting battles or trudging through endless marches, you're part of something bigger, even if it's just a ragtag group of hungry, grumpy men sitting around a campfire. There's a camaraderie in that shared experience, for now. At least, it's enough. So, as you take your first bite of what you're fairly certain is the best meat you've had in weeks, it's actually goat. But it doesn't matter. You allow yourself to feel that fleeting sense of satisfaction. You've made it this far, and maybe, just maybe, there's a reason to keep going, because if you can survive this, if you can survive the endless days of mud, bad food, and relentless marching, then maybe you are cut out for this knightly life. Or maybe you've just got a really good sense of humour, and that's what's keeping you going. Either way, tomorrow will come, and the march will begin again. But for now, you're sitting here, in the company of your fellow knights, feeling like maybe, just maybe, there's hope for you yet. Well, this is it. The grind doesn't stop, does it? It's morning again, and you're still here, still walking, still dragging your armour, still fighting the inevitable exhaustion that creeps into your bones. The sun's already up, and with it, the familiar heat that hangs heavy in the air, like some sort of cruel reminder that you've still got a long way to go. It's like every day is the same, a monotonous march to nowhere. And yet, you're still here, and let's be real, at some point, it feels like you're going to be walking forever. You're starting to wonder if you'll even survive this trail. The aches in your body are relentless, your feet sore, your back screaming in protest at every movement, and the thought of walking even one more step feels borderline impossible. Yet, somehow, you keep putting one foot in front of the other, because that's the thing about nights, you don't quit. Sure, you've probably thought about it, probably a lot, but knights don't quit. They trudge forward, they keep moving, even when everything in them wants to turn back and run for the hills. You can't afford to quit, so you keep walking, you keep dragging your tired limbs, and you keep moving because there's no other choice. There's a weird sense of camaraderie among you and the rest of the knights. Though, despite everything, despite the aches, the pain, the exhaustion, there's something oddly unifying about this misery. You look over at your companions and realise they're all feeling it, too. Everyone's groaning, everyone's dragging, but at least everyone's in the same miserable boat. You look to your right, and there's Gregor, the most stubborn knight you've ever met. He's got this look on his face, like he's absolutely had it with the whole idea of knighthood. But he's not about to stop either. You can't help but laugh a little. It's the kind of laugh you only share with the people who are experiencing the exact same hell you are, in a strange way. That's what keeps you all going. The shared burden of it all. If you can't get through this together, what's the point? But hey, it's not all bad. Not all the time. There are moments when, despite the pain and the frustration, you get a little glimmer of something else, a little flicker of what it's all for. Sure, it's easy to forget the bigger picture when you're knee-deep in mud, but sometimes, just sometimes, something happens that reminds you why you've chosen this path. Like when you finally come across a village, after days of trudging through nothing but dirt and dust. The sight of a few houses, actual houses, and maybe a small tavern or two, brings a surge of something like hope. It's not much, but it's enough to remind you that there's still a reason to keep going. You walk into the village with the others, and for once, there's a kind of relief in the air. People are giving you the side eye. Sure, they're probably wondering who on earth would choose to spend their days walking through dirt, battling exhaustion, and wearing that ridiculous armour. But there's a moment when you all stop at the edge of the village, where the dust finally settles, and the world doesn't feel quite so hostile. The village is simple, small, but the smells of fresh bread and roasting meats hit you like a wave. Suddenly, it doesn't matter how sore you are. You don't even care if the bread is a little stale. You're here, and that's enough. And that's when it hits you. This is why you keep going. This small moment of reprieve, this little glimpse of normalcy. It's not about the battles. It's not about the glory. It's about these moments. The brief flashes of something better. The small rewards that remind you that, despite everything, there's still something worth fighting for. So you push forward. You take the bread. You grab the meats. And you sit down at one of the tables with your fellow knights, who, let's face it, probably look just as ridiculous as you do. But no one's complaining. Not now. Not when there's food in front of you and a roof over your head for just a few hours. But, of course, life has a funny way of making sure you don't get too comfortable. That moment of peace doesn't last long. Because guess what? You've got a long way to go still. There's no stopping now. Not when there's still a journey ahead of you. And here's where the true test begins, getting back on the road. You finish your meal, give a nod of gratitude to the locals, and then, like the dutiful knight you are, you gather your gear and prepare for the next leg of the journey. The armour is heavy again, the sun is still hot, and the road stretches on, seemingly never ending. The nights start to form up, and you look around at the faces you've come to know, some tired, some hardened by the journey, others just as confused about what's going on as you are, but you all share one thing in common. You're still here, and in the world of knights, that counts for something. It might not be much, but it's something. You start walking again. The ground is uneven, the air dry, and the weight of your armour presses down on you as it always does. But now, it's different. There's a rhythm to it. You've done this 1,000 times before, and you'll do it 1,000 times again. Every step feels like you're getting closer to something, even though you don't know what that something is yet. And so the journey continues. You keep marching. You keep walking through the endless landscape. The never-ending trek through mud, dust and grass. Your legs hurt, your back aches, and you're starting to wonder just how many more days you can keep this up. But you do it. You keep moving. Because that's what knights do. The pain is part of the process. The discomfort is just part of the journey. And when you look at the faces of your fellow knights, you realise that. In the end, you're all in this together. You're all walking the same road, and somehow that's enough to keep going. This is it, your life. Not the grand speeches, not the shiny armour, not the glorious battles on horseback. It's the slow, trudging march of a knight trying to find his place in the world. Maybe that's what it's really about. It's not about grand victories. It's about the perseverance, the persistence, the quiet moments that remind you of what you're fighting for. And with that, you put one foot in front of the other, ready to face whatever comes next. Because, let's face it, this life doesn't stop. The sun has just crested the horizon when you and your fellow knights finally break camp. The early morning chill still hangs in the air, but it's only a matter of time before the heat will come crashing down again, like a hammer. The day is young, but you already know exactly what's in store for you. More walking, more discomfort, more miles stretching on ahead of you. And let's be honest, you won't be the one who quits. The sun could bake you like an old biscuit, and you'll keep going. That's what knights do. Right now. Though, it's just another day of trudging. There's nothing spectacular about it, no battle cries, No heroic victories, just the rhythmic crunch of your boots on the dirt, the heavy clank of your armour, and the general sense that, if you were really being honest with yourself, you would much rather be anywhere but here. But that's the thing, you've been here so many times now, that the idea of anything else seems almost laughable. This is your life now, walking, eating stale bread, and waiting for the next miserable moment to hit. No dramatic fights, no glorious victories, just the slow, steady march of existence. You look over at your companions. Gerald, the stubborn one, still has that look of grim determination etched into his face. You've seen it so many times now that it's become almost a permanent feature. The man's a walking monument to misery, but he's here every day, dragging himself through the muck like the rest of you, beside him. Frank is actually humming. You don't know how he's doing it, humming, like he's not living a nightmare, but somehow, there's Frank, letting out little bits of music like some deranged, upbeat bard, as though the world is his stage. You can't help but let out a quiet laugh. Despite yourself, Frank's got this way of making everything seem bearable, even if it's only for a few minutes. There's something endearing about that, and that's what gets you through, isn't it? Not the grand speeches, not the banners flapping in the wind, or the trophies you'd hang on your wall when you're all done. No, it's the camaraderie, the moments when you're walking, or sitting by the fire, or eating the worst meal imaginable, and you look around at your fellow knights and realise that, for all the pain, you're not alone in it. That's the real magic of knighthood. It's not the gold or the glory, it's the people you share this miserable experience with. But before you can reflect too long, you're back at it. There's no time for pondering. There's only one task at hand: keep moving forward. Every step is the same as the last one, but it doesn't matter. You keep going. It's almost automatic now. After a few hours of walking, the first break comes. It's barely a break at all, just long enough to catch your breath before heading out again. And, as usual, there's no place to sit, nothing soft to lean against. You find yourself crouching down on the damp earth, using your shield as a makeshift backrest. The armour digs into your skin, but you ignore it, focusing on the quiet hum of the world around you. The knights are scattered across the camp, all of them in the same position, silently enduring. It's weirdly calming, this shared silence, even as it's filled with the heavy weight of unspoken thoughts. Everyone knows what's coming next. More walking, more grinding through the dirt, until your body is begging you to stop, but you don't stop. You can't stop. It's hard to find anything to talk about, sure. You could talk about the weather, but you've been talking about the weather for days now, and frankly, no one really cares anymore. You could talk about the land you're passing through, but there's nothing to say. It's all just miles of dusty, arid wasteland. You've seen it all before. There's nothing new here. There's no excitement, no adrenaline, just endless stretches of land, the occasional gust of wind, and the sound of your boots hitting the ground. But then, just when you think the day couldn't get any worse, you see it, a small village, barely more than a few shacks and huts. Rising up out of the distance, the sight is almost too good to be true. For a second, you think it's a mirage, but no, it's real. And it's the first real sight of civilization you've seen in what feels like forever. Your heart lifts for a moment, and then you remember this is where the knights will try to impress you. Every single one of you will step forward and strut like some peacock on a mission, as though you're not all equally tired and equally miserable. You know the routine, but for now, you're just happy to have a change of scenery, even if it's just for a brief moment. The village isn't much, and you're reminded once again that knights are more accustomed to hardship than luxury. There's no grand hall waiting for you, no banquet feast prepared in your honour, just a few humble houses and a small tavern with a weathered sign hanging above the door. It's nothing to write home about, but right now, it's everything. You step inside, dragging your feet, and the door creaks open with a groan that's somehow comforting. The warm, musty air inside is a welcome relief from the dry heat outside. The place is filled with people common folk, mostly sitting around wooden tables, eating simple meals, talking about the latest happenings in their corner of the world. It's a far cry from the grand tournaments and feasts you imagined, but it's real, it's human. The tavern keeper, an older man with a scruffy beard, looks up as you enter, his eyes flicking over the group of knights before settling on you. He offers a small nod and goes back to wiping down the counter. You've seen it before. You're not special. You're just another knight passing through. There's no fanfare, no applause, just the quiet clink of mugs and the murmur of voices. You take a seat, grateful for the break, and order the special, which, judging by the look on the tavern keeper's face, is probably something closer to a culinary disaster. But it doesn't matter, it's food, it's warm, it's something, and that's all that matters right now. The meal. Predictably. Isn't much to write home about. It's gruel, if we're being generous. But the warmth is comforting. The taste is, well, at least it's not raw. You take a deep breath and try to relax, even though the thought of continuing the journey weighs heavily on your mind. You're here now, for a brief, fleeting moment. This feels like home, but you know, deep down, it's only temporary. The moment you step out that door, it's back to the grind, back to the walking, back to the misery. You finish the meal, wiping your mouth with the back of your hand, and head out the door once again, ready to face the miles ahead. And so it goes. This life, this endless march. The food may be terrible, the day's long, and the night's too cold, but you keep moving forward. You do it for the camaraderie. You do it for the small victories. The moments when you feel human again. You do it because, well, what else can you do? You've done it again. Another day. Another endless stretch of land to traverse. And somehow, you're still walking. You've never hated walking so much in your life. But here you are, legs aching, feet bleeding through the soles of your boots. And yet, you press on. The sun is relentless, beating down on you like a hammer. You can feel the heat rising off the earth, warping the air ahead of you. The landscape hasn't changed. It's just as barren and soul-sucking as it was yesterday. Dust clings to your skin like a second layer of armour. It's like you've been walking for years, but it's only been a matter of days. You've made it, somehow, to the afternoon. The sun is at its peak, and the air is hot enough to cook you alive if you stand still long enough. You can feel the sweat dripping from your brow, running down your neck, and soaking into the fabric of your tunic. Your armour is an oven, turning every step into a mini sauna. It's unbearable. You try not to think about it. You try to focus on the rhythm of the walk, the repetitive sound of your boots hitting the earth, the occasional grunt from a fellow knight. But deep down, you're tired, the kind of tired that sits in your bones, makes you want to curl up in the shade and pretend the world doesn't exist for just a moment. You glance around, and it's like the world is daring you to stop, but you can't. The thing about being a knight is that you don't have the luxury of quitting. You don't have the luxury of stopping. Not when the road is this long, and not when your comrades are trudging along beside you. It's strange, really. You all complain, all of you, but no one says it out loud at least. Not in a way that makes any real difference. Every knight here knows the drill. You keep walking, you push forward, no matter how much your body protests, no matter how many times your brain tells you to sit down and never get back up again, as you march on. The rest of the group fades into the background. You don't need to look at them to know they're as miserable as you are. It's not a competition, it's just the reality of the journey. Everyone is fighting their own battle, some with their own body, others with their emotions. You can hear Gregor muttering to himself ahead of you, His curses are practically a background noise at this point. But you get it. You all get it. He's tired, you're tired. Frank, of course, is still trying to keep spirits high with his annoying little songs. You've got to admire the man's dedication. How does he do it? It's like he's immune to exhaustion. Maybe that's why you've never quite liked him. Frank has that way of making everything seem so much easier, even when you know it's not. And right now, you really need it to be easier. You feel a pang of envy for his ability to hum, even as you wish you could just strangle him with your own sweaty, fatigued hands. But then again, who could blame him for trying to stay sane? You can't blame him for trying to lighten the mood in the midst of this endless misery. He's just like the rest of you, walking, carrying his weight and the weight of every night in your party, and yet he still finds a way to keep some sense of humour about it. You almost find yourself smiling. But then you remember the heat, the dust, and the fact that your feet are about to fall off. So you decide against it, and then, as if the universe is sending you a little reminder, you hear it, a distant sound, faint but growing louder. You strain your ears, trying to make sense of it, but there's no mistaking it. It's the sound of music, not the cheery little hum of Frank's ridiculous songs. No, this is real music. A tune that seems to be floating on the wind, almost impossibly clear in the oppressive silence of the landscape. You stop in your tracks. The other knights do the same. All of you frozen in place for a moment, listening. It's like a strange mirage, like something you'd expect in a dream. Not in the middle of this God-forsaken journey. You're not sure whether it's real or just some sort of auditory hallucination, brought on by the heat and your lack of sleep. But it's there. It sounds like a flute, a gentle, sweet tune, completely out of place in this vast desert of dust and weariness. Do you hear that Gregor's voice breaks the spell? He sounds just as confused as you are, but there's something else in his voice, something faintly hopeful, as though, against all odds, this little bit of music could somehow offer the comfort you've been craving. The rest of the knights nod, their eyes scanning the horizon, as though hoping to see the source of this unexpected miracle. And then, you see it, a small oasis, a patch of green surrounded by palm trees and wildflowers. It's barely visible from a distance, almost hidden among the hills. But there it is, you can't believe it. This is the last thing you expected, in a world that has been nothing but barren land and endless trudging. There is an oasis, and there, standing beside the tiny water source, is a small group of people. They're playing music, they're dancing. It's ridiculous, isn't it? You've been walking for days, drenched in sweat, covered in dust, and here are these people, these absolute strangers, celebrating life like nothing is wrong. They're laughing, singing, swaying to the music, completely unaware of the hell you've been going through. For a moment, you stand there, taking it all in. The music fills the air, and for just a brief second, you forget the pain, the exhaustion, the journey. You forget about being a knight. You forget about the armour, the sword, and the long road ahead of you. You close your eyes, allowing the music to wash over you. It's like a gift from the gods, a little piece of heaven dropped into your miserable existence. But then, of course, reality crashes back down. This isn't your world. You're not meant to be here, basking in the comfort of some random oasis. You're not meant to relax. You're a knight. Remember, you've got responsibilities. The others are already starting to get their bearings. They can't help themselves. It's too tempting. The water, the food, the music. You've been walking so long. You've forgotten what it feels like to be comfortable. And so, the knights start walking toward the oasis, one by one, like moths to a flame. You stand still for a moment longer, watching them, feeling the weight of your own exhaustion pressing on you. But there's a part of you, the knight part of you, that knows this isn't your rest stop. It can't be. You can't afford it, not now, not yet. The journey is far from over, and there's still so much to do, to see, to fight. You turn away from the oasis, the sweet music still echoing in your ears, and you set your sights ahead again. You've got a job to do. The bliss of the oasis fades faster than a dream at dawn. It's almost cruel, really. For a brief moment, you thought you could take a breath, enjoy the sweetness of music and water, but now, as the nights shuffle back toward the trail, faces flushed with a brief moment of joy, the weight of your armour returns, and with it, the unrelenting reality of what lies ahead. You clench your jaw, willing your body to move forward, pushing your thoughts away like a distant memory. That oasis was nothing more than a mirage, an illusion of comfort. It wasn't real. What's real is this never-ending walk. By now, your body has grown accustomed to the discomfort, if you can call it that. You don't just walk anymore, you drag yourself. It's like your muscles have all agreed that walking is for the young and foolish. But here you are, a knight, still trudging along with the others, and the road is as unforgiving as ever. Every step brings the same dull ache, a constant reminder that this is what your life has become, just one step after another, all the while praying that the day will eventually come when you can rest. But you know better. Knights don't rest. We don't stop. The only rest you'll get is when you finally drop dead from exhaustion, and even then, you're probably supposed to keep marching in the afterlife. Your mind drifts for a moment, imagining what it would be like if the world just stopped. You could take off your armour, put down your sword, maybe find a little house somewhere by the sea, away from the grind, but it's all a fantasy. Nights are not meant for rest. Nights are meant for action, and action is exactly what awaits you. You can hear the rustle of your companions around you. They're still here, still trudging beside you, like a silent army of the tired and the broken. They've all been through the same thing. Gerald is still grumbling to himself up ahead, probably counting every step like a soldier marching toward the gallows. Frank, the one who never seems to tire, is walking along in the front of the group. You can't help but wonder if he's some sort of supernatural creature, cursed to wander the earth eternally without feeling fatigue. You glance at him, and for just a moment, you envy the carefree bounce in his step. His sword swings at his side like it's weightless, while yours feels like it's strapped to your bones. But no, you shake your head. You can't let yourself get distracted. This is the path you chose, the path every night before you has walked, and so you walk. The day stretches on, the hours dragging like the seconds of a long sermon. You don't even notice the scenery anymore. It all looks the same, dry, barren, endless. It's like you've entered the twilight zone of landscapes, where every mile is identical to the one before it, and the silence. The silence is the worst part, not the silence of peace, but the silence of exhaustion. No one speaks anymore. There's nothing left to say. You're all just here, trapped in this moment, wandering like lost souls. At some point, you stop looking ahead. You can't keep your eyes on the road forever. You need something else to distract yourself. That's when your gaze falls to the ground, to the dust, that ever-present companion. It's so thick, it almost seems like you could reach down and touch the earth itself. You've become one with it. Your skin is covered in the same layer of grime. You realise, with a strange sense of humour, that you could probably be mistaken for a living pile of dust if you were to lie down. That's when you spot it. A rock, just sitting there in the middle of the path, like an invitation. And before you even think about it, your feet take you toward it, your body desperate for any excuse to rest. You sit down heavily, wincing as the rock digs into your backside. But you don't care. You're finally sitting. For the first time in what feels like forever, your legs get a break. The moment is brief, but it's blissful. You close your eyes, letting the weight of the armour shift and settle, and then you hear the familiar sound, the clatter of boots, the grumble of Gerald's voice, the snicker of Frank's laugh as he hums some absurd tune again. The rest of the knights are moving forward, still continuing on, and they're giving you that look. That don't get too comfortable look. You roll your eyes and push yourself to your feet with a grunt. You'd love to just lie here forever, but the reality is that you can't. A knight doesn't rest when the world needs him. A knight keeps moving. You join the rest of the group, your legs aching with each step, but there's a sense of determination now that wasn't there before. Maybe it's the idea of movement, of progress. Maybe it's the realization that this is what you're supposed to be doing. There's no turning back now, not when there's so much more to be done. And so, you keep walking. But then, as if to mock the very idea of progress, you hear it, a voice, not one of your companions, someone else, someone who shouldn't be here. You turn around, instinctively reaching for your sword. Your heart skips a beat. There, in the distance, standing on a small hill, is a figure dressed in long, flowing robes, the sun casting a strange light on their form. You squint, trying to make out who or what it is. But no, it's not a knight, it's not a fellow traveller, it's something else. The figure raises their arm, and for a moment, the world seems to stand still. You and the rest of the knights stop in your tracks, staring at the figure with a mixture of confusion and disbelief. You've seen many things in your travels, but this is new. There's something almost otherworldly about it. The figure gestures toward the horizon. A strange symbol, something unfamiliar, is etched on the robes. It's not a symbol you've ever seen before. The hair on the back of your neck stands on end. What is this? What's going on and why? Of all things, is there some stranger out here in the middle of nowhere, just watching? Your mind races. Was this a sign? A warning? A trick? You try to shake the thoughts away. It's just your fatigue playing tricks on you, right? Just your exhaustion making you see things that aren't there. But the figure doesn't move. They just stand there, like a statue, a silent sentinel in the distance. You take a step forward, your legs protesting. The others follow, their eyes fixed on the strange figure. You can feel the tension in the air, thick as the dust beneath your feet. And then, without warning, the figure is gone, disappeared, as if it had never been there at all. You blink, trying to make sense of what you've just seen. Was it real? Was it just a mirage brought on by your hunger and exhaustion? You turn to your fellow knights, but no one speaks. No one says anything. They're just as confused as you are. You shake your head, trying to clear the fog. Maybe it was a hallucination. Maybe you're losing your mind from the heat and the stress. Maybe it's just a trick of the light. But still, the memory of that strange figure lingers in your mind. You continue to walk, but now there's a new sense of unease. The horizon seems emptier, somehow. The trail ahead seems longer, darker, more uncertain. Every step feels heavier, as if the weight of the world is slowly pressing down on you. You glance around, looking for some sign, some explanation, but there's nothing, just the same endless road, stretching on forever. You push forward, even though your mind keeps replaying that strange image, the figure on the hill, the gesture, the emptiness that followed. You have no answers, no explanation, just more walking. And yet, you can't shake the feeling that something has changed, something you can't quite grasp. And so, you keep moving, one step after another, just like the knights before you, and just like the ones who will come after. The road stretches ahead, and you know that it will never end, but maybe that's the point. So here you are, trudging along, your legs aching and your mind scattered like the dust you're kicking up. Every step is like a slow-motion battle against gravity, your body begging for rest, but your spirit pushing forward. You could almost hear your bones creaking, like the old wagon back at the oasis, that clunky, squeaky, unreliable thing that never seemed to give up much like you. For better or worse, there's no turning back now, not with the journey stretching ahead, like a canvas for your misery. Your legs are leaden, your sword feels like it's glued to your side, and the heat isn't helping. And yet, here you are, moving. There's no real reason for it. You're not fighting a battle, you're not charging into the unknown, you're just walking. It's almost pathetic if you think about it for too long. Knights are supposed to be on horseback. Aren't they strong, heroic figures who charge into battle with valour and purpose? Instead, here you are, walking through an empty land. Nothing but sweat, dust, and more sweat, and the occasional, ever-present question, why? Why it's become your mantra. You've asked it 100 times already, and you're sure you'll ask it 100 more before this is over. The question feels so hollow now, though, as though even asking it doesn't matter anymore. Why the answer is just as empty as the landscape in front of you. And yet, you walk. It's not just the exhaustion, it's everything else, too. The burning sun, the endless stretch of nothingness, the deafening silence. There's no music, no laughter, no songs. The air is thick with dust, and your eyes are starting to burn every now and then. You catch the faintest whiff of something, maybe a distant smell of smoke, or a fleeting breeze that makes you wonder if the world beyond this trail is even real. But then, just as quickly, it vanishes. This is what it means to be a knight on the move, isn't it? It's not about grand battles, not about winning or glory. It's just this. The long march, the endless journey with no end in sight. You reach for your canteen, but it's empty. Of course it's empty. It's always empty. You curse quietly under your breath, hoping that somehow the universe will throw you a bone. But no, the universe has no interest in your petty complaints. It has no interest in you at all. So, you keep walking, and then, out of nowhere, you hear it. The faintest sound, almost imperceptible, like a whisper on the wind. You freeze, your body going stiff as your ears strain to catch it. There it is again, that sound. Is it laughter, a voice you can't quite make it out? But it's there, in the distance. A small part of you hopes it's just a trick, a hallucination brought on by your exhaustion, but then you hear it again, clearer this time. Hey, you, it's unmistakable now. Someone is calling out to you. You stop in your tracks, eyes darting around in search of the source of the voice. It's not one of your companions. No, this is different. You see, there's a difference between the grumbles of your fellow knights and the sound of an actual human voice that isn't complaining about the heat or the lack of food. You tense, your hand instinctively going to the hilt of your sword. Is it an enemy, a bandit, a traveller in distress? You don't know, but you're not taking any chances. And then, from behind a large boulder, you see them. It's not one person, it's a group, a motley crew of, well, you're not sure what to make of them. They're not knights, that's for sure. They look more like wanderers, travellers who have been lost for far too long, with ragged clothes and wild eyes, and they're laughing. Laughter that doesn't make sense, laughter that feels like it's a way to keep the darkness at bay. One of them, a man with a wild beard and a toothy grin, steps forward and waves a hand. Well, look at you, he calls out, as if this whole situation is the most amusing thing in the world. Another poor knight walking to his doom. You eye him warily, trying to figure out if he's mocking you or just genuinely mad. Either way, you don't have time for this. You start to turn, about to walk away, but then the man calls out again. What's your name? Knight, he asks, his voice almost playful, too playful for your liking. Tell me your name, and I'll tell you mine. Maybe we can swap stories. You stop in your tracks. What is this, a joke? An invitation to join a band of lost souls, wandering through the wilderness with no real destination. You don't have time for this nonsense. You've got your own problems. But there's something about the man's grin, something about the way he speaks. It's not just the typical mockery of the road. It's something else, something darker, like a challenge. Why, you ask? Finally, unable to resist the pull of his strange charisma, why should I tell you my name? You don't even know who I am. The man laughs again, a sound that feels too loud, too jarring. Oh, I know who you are, he says, eyes twinkling, like he's in on some joke that you're not part of. You're a knight, a tired knight, just like the rest of us. We all know the way this goes. You've been walking for days, haven't you? Your body's tired, your mind's gone foggy. You've got your sword, you've got your armour. But deep down, you know that none of that matters out here. Not really. His words hang in the air, a strange weight pressing down on you. He's right, isn't he? You're just another knight, trudging through the endless dust, trying to make sense of a world that's slipping away. But you can't let him know that. You can't let him see that crack in your armour. Instead, you hold your ground, straightening up as best as you can. I'm not interested in your games, you reply, your voice low. I'm on a mission. The man grins even wider. A mission. Well, I've got a mission too, and let me tell you, it doesn't get any easier, no matter how far you walk. But you're already learning that, aren't you? His words sting. But you don't show it. You can't show it. You've got to keep your cool. You're a knight, after all. Without a word, you turn to leave, your steps heavy as you move past the group. But just as you think you've escaped, the man calls out one last time. Don't forget. Knight, he says, his tone suddenly dark. We all end up in the same place eventually, but some of us get there faster than others. The hairs on the back of your neck stand up. You turn, but the group is already gone, fading into the distance like a mirage. Were they ever even real? Did any of it actually happen? Or was it just another moment of hallucination, brought on by the heat and exhaustion? You shake your head and continue walking, but the man's words linger. We all end up in the same place eventually. What did that mean? You don't have time to think about it now. The journey continues, one step at a time. Your thoughts swirl as you keep walking, each step carrying you further into the unknown. The weight of your armour doesn't feel any lighter, and your feet are still dragging with every mile. But there's a part of you that's starting to wonder, are you really in control here? Are you truly the one guiding this journey? Or is something else at play? With that unsettling thought, you keep moving forward, hoping that the end of this long road is just around the corner though. In your heart, you know it's not. The air feels different now, doesn't it? It's thicker, heavier, and it presses down on your shoulders like a second suit of armour. The sun burns the back of your neck, casting a golden haze over the barren landscape. But it doesn't matter anymore. The thirst, the hunger, the fatigue, it all blends together into one single overwhelming feeling, exhaustion. And yet, somehow, you keep moving, one step after another, like a machine that doesn't know how to stop. There's a part of you that thinks you might collapse if you ever do stop. But you can't allow yourself that luxury. Not now. Not when the end is so close. You can feel it. You can almost taste the end of the road, the relief, the promised land that you've been trudging toward for what feels like an eternity. But there's still a ways to go. There always is. The endless horizon taunts you with its distance. Just when you think you're almost there, you look up and realise you're still as far from your destination as you were hours ago, days ago, weeks ago. Your companions, the other knights, seem to feel it too. The quiet despair that's settled in among the group. There's no more chatter, no more laughter. The clinking of armour and the sound of boots on dirt are the only noises that fill the silence. Even Frank, the ever-cheerful one, has fallen into a sullen, almost trance-like walk. The camaraderie that once existed among you all has long since faded, replaced by a shared understanding that no words can break the weight of the journey. You are all here, together, and yet you are all alone in your suffering. And then, as though the world is playing one last cruel trick on you, you feel it. The first drop of rain, a single drop, barely noticeable, but it's enough to make you stop in your tracks. You look up at the sky, searching for signs of the storm you know is coming. And there it is, the dark clouds gathering, rolling in like an army of shadows. You feel a shiver run down your spine, not from the cold, but from the realization that the universe is about to remind you of its power. You keep walking, your feet dragging in the mud now, the first few drops of rain turning the dust into slippery muck. It's like nature itself has decided to join in the misery, adding its own touch of discomfort to the endless grind. It's almost as if the road itself is conspiring against you. The rain comes down in fits and starts, never quite steady, always teasing you with the promise of relief that never quite arrives. Your armour grows heavier, your boots feel like they've been soaked through, and the familiar ache in your back intensifies with every step. The sound of the rain, now heavier, becomes a constant drumbeat in your ears. It's a rhythm that matches the pace of your trudging, the sound of your footsteps sinking deeper into the mud with every movement. Your once immaculate armour, polished to a shine at the start of the journey, is now caked in dirt, water and rust. Your helmet is weighed down by the rainwater that's pooled inside, and you can barely see through the fog that's formed around your vision. Frank, who's walking a few steps ahead of you, lets out a loud, disgruntled sigh. "It's like the world's out to get us," he mutters, his voice barely audible over the pattering rain. You look at him and can't help but agree. It feels like everything, every step, every breath is a battle against the elements, the road and your own body. But there's no choice but to keep going. You can't afford to stop. Not now, not when you're so close to the end. Your mind drifts back to the days before this, before the endless walking, the fatigue, the struggle. You remember when you were first knighted, how you imagined the life of a knight would be filled with glory, honour and adventure. You thought you would be charging into battle, sword in hand, leading your men to victory. Instead, here you are, trudging through a rainstorm with mud in your boots, your sword heavy at your side, and your body betraying you with every step. Was this it? Was this what it meant to be a knight? You had imagined something far grander, something worthy of legends, but the reality was much less romantic. The reality was this slow, painful, relentless. The journey was not about heroism, but about survival, about pushing through the pain, the exhaustion, the disappointment, and the fear. Every step forward is a victory, not against an enemy, but against your own limitations, against the very elements that seem to conspire against you. The rain becomes heavier, and the wind picks up, carrying with it the chill that cuts through your soaked armour. Your teeth begin to chatter involuntarily, and you pull your cloak tighter around yourself, though it barely helps. There's no use in trying to fight it now. The cold, the rain, the mud they've won. You're just a soldier in a world that doesn't care, walking through the elements, waiting for something, anything that might signal an end to this journey. And yet, even as the rain beats down on you, something in your chest refuses to give in. You keep moving. Maybe it's out of pride. Maybe it's because you're a knight. And that's what knights do. But deep down, you know it's more than that. It's because you have to. You've come too far to turn back now. You've endured too much to simply stop. Another hour passes, maybe two, but the rain shows no signs of letting up. The path is now a thick, muddy slurry, and the knights behind you have slowed to a near crawl. Everyone's been hit by the fatigue now, the sheer exhaustion of it all. You look around, and for the first time, you realise how quiet it is. There's no laughter, no grumbling, no sounds of battle or glory. It's just the sound of trudging feet, The rain and the wind, nothing else. Finally, just when you think you can't go another step, you see it. A small shelter, nestled by the side of the road. It's a humble thing, built hastily by some previous traveller. But to you, it looks like the gates of paradise. You can't see inside yet, but the promise of shelter, of refuge, sparks a flicker of hope in your chest. You push yourself forward, your legs almost moving on their own now, and before long, you're standing in front of the shelter. The others are close behind, their faces tired, their bodies soaked to the bone. You hesitate for a moment, your hand on the door. What's inside? Is it empty? Is it another mirage? But then you hear a voice from inside, a familiar voice. "Come in," Frank calls, his voice surprisingly upbeat. "I got the fire started. We might not be dry, but at least we can be warm." You step inside, and the warmth from the fire wraps around you like a blanket. You sit down by the fire, the heat from the flames soothing your frozen body. The smell of smoke and cooking meat fills the air, and for the first time in what feels like days, you let yourself relax. The weight of your armour doesn't feel as heavy, and the rain tapping against the roof is almost comforting now. You glance around the small shelter. The walls are made of rough wood, and there's not much to it, but it's enough. It's more than enough. And for the first time in a long while, you let yourself smile. "Looks like we made it," you say, the words feeling strange in your mouth, like they've been stuck there for too long. But it's true. You made it through the rain, through the endless march, through the fatigue and the uncertainty. You made it here, to this tiny shelter. And that, in itself, feels like a victory.